Hi, for this session, I am joined by Dr. Karen Buchanan, who is the curator at Gairloch Museum, and by Eilidh Smith, who is the front of house coordinator at Gairloch Museum. And we're going to be talking about their work in 2020, but specifically focused around a really special event that happened for them last year when they were winners of the Art Fund Museum of the Year. And that gave a real focus to a lot of the work that they were doing. So I'm just going to open up their slides. Okay, so hi, Karen and Eilidh, introduce yourself briefly first before we get going.
Hi, I'm Karen Buchanan and I'm curator at Gairloch Museum and have been since 2013.
I'm Eilidh Smith and I work front of house and also help with a bit of marketing and communications, and only came to work at Gairloch Museum just before this announcement of us as a Museum of the Year.
Great, thank you. So one of the first slides we have up here is just your little winners video. I'll just give this a little play. It might be a little bit sticky on Zoom for some people, but I'll just play a small section of it.
The building was constructed in the 1950s in the early part of the Cold War as an anti-aircraft operations room. And it was also repurposed later in the 1980s as an emergency operations centre. So it has its own history and we've retained aspects of that.
Well, this place was an old Cold War bunker built around 1950. I think the building makes it unique. And the location, the motivation for opening it was that there was an increasing collection of artifacts, local artifacts, which people were donating, and it became incumbent of the community to find a home.
What the award means to Gairloch Museum is, first of all, recognition of our achievements. We don't have a large exhibitions budget, but what we do have is a great skills resource among our volunteers who are willing to research and interpret and put exhibitions together on aspects of local interest.
We have sort of prehistory and Gaelic culture. Our sort of main exhibit is the Fresnel lens, the lighthouse lens.
We have a fascinating local geology and also natural heritage.
The new museum, I think what's marvellous is the space we have here. It's certainly one of the best in the north of Scotland.
So perhaps we could start right at the very beginning, and you could tell us a little bit about the process that was involved in applying for the award and how that sort of played out over the preceding months.
Sure, so I guess I'll take that one. We applied in February, I believe. The application had to be in, and it's quite a simple application form, but you had to produce a short video of 2 or 3 minutes to say why you thought that you deserved to be Museum of the Year. And our application was very much focused on the community buy-in to our project. So on the slide there, you see an auction that we held, for example, for fundraising for the new museum. And I think the judges were really drawn by the idea of this sort of smallish community raising such vast quantities of money to save their museum. It was a real, it was a story that obviously appealed to them. Yeah. We heard then not long after that, probably in March, that we had been shortlisted for Museum of the Year. And in a normal year, the 5 museums who have been shortlisted will go through a kind of a marketing and social media campaign guided by Art Fund, and will, I guess, kind of compete with each other for the title. And it usually goes to an audience vote then. But not long after we were shortlisted, of course, COVID hit and the whole process changed.
Wow, that's really interesting. I hadn't realised that the whole kind of vote process had changed as well. So did you then have to keep that as a secret? What happened over the next few months?
Yes, so normally the judges will come and visit you. And as I say, there's this whole sort of campaign in the lead up to the announcement, which is usually in July. And at a big celebration in London where the winner is announced. And we were told that we would be coming to this event with a big group of our volunteers. We'd all go down to London and we'd hear who had won. And none of this could unfortunately happen. And Art Fund themselves had to get their head around how the process was going to work in a period where people couldn't actually visit museums and they were having to move everything to a different model. So they delayed things and they delayed them again, but they involved us in the process too. We had remote chats with them and they got a feel for what our priorities were and what would work for us. And then they ultimately came up with the idea of increasing the prize money and declaring all 5 of the shortlisted museums winners, which was great.
And perhaps you tell us a little bit about what that kind of means for Gairloch Museum and for a lot of your wonderful volunteers that we see in the picture in front of us.
Yeah, the picture there is 3 years ago now when we were awarded the Queen's Award for voluntary service for our volunteers, which is fantastic. And as you say, we had to keep this secret, so we couldn't even tell our volunteers. There was a very small circle of people who actually knew that we had won until the announcement was made on live television at some point in October. So that was 6 months, I think, we had to sit on this secret. And we were desperate to share it with our volunteers because we just knew it would mean so much to them. And the response, and Eilidh was there too, and we can talk about this a bit more, but the response the next day was just absolutely incredible. And I think it's fair to say that it wasn't just by our volunteers, it was the whole village were just absolutely excited about this happening.
So, and when you talk about that inner circle of trust, when I was first approached over whether I might be interested in helping with a bit of marketing and social media, and there might be a campaign coming up. So I think I didn't even know until about a week before the announcement what was actually happening. But it, that came from Art Fund, that it had to be kept completely under wraps. But yeah, as soon as the news was out, I remember a morning, Karen, where there was a bit of post that came to you and it just said Gairloch Museum. There was no other address on it. And it's like, oh my God, we're famous.
Yeah, that was our first thank you card, I think. And you remember our Twitter just went nuts. I had to turn my phone off because it was literally dinging every 10 seconds. We just couldn't keep up with it. I
think what I find so lovely is just when you mention about how the whole community were so excited, that it goes beyond, because I think we can often have a passion, a connection to our own museum, but there is something extra special when you realise that the rest of the world might love it too. And that kind of pride that you get in, well, this is ours, but we're happy to share it with you. Have you seen that kind of a knock-on effect from that? Or?
I think so. I mean, I can remember just recently, for example, I was at a community council meeting and we were talking about putting a map of the village up for visitors, and somebody was saying, you must have our award-winning museum on that. This is somebody who's got nothing to do with the museum, but yeah, the fact that we are Museum of the Year and we have this massive award, I think means a lot to the community as a whole.
And I think we've even seen it in visitors since the region reopened, that there are people who, since this announcement, have been saying, right, once I can, I want to go to Gairloch Museum and see it for myself. And that's maybe people who have visited before or visited the old venue. So yeah, it's definitely put us on the map, literal and metaphorical.
Yeah, and last October, when the announcement was made, I think it was just at the beginning of October, and we'd been open for a couple of months, but not as busy as we would be in a normal year, obviously. And we had something like it was almost 100% of the visitors based on the previous year. We had pretty much the same number in October last year as we'd had the October before, which, given the whole COVID situation and the fact that there weren't many people traveling at all, was actually quite remarkable.
And so this might be a good point for us to talk a bit about how the celebrations of that would be quite different from a normal year then. We were mentioning that perhaps there would have been an award ceremony that you would have gone to, but from memory, I think in October actually things were getting tighter again and we were heading into more lockdowns and not the other way around. So perhaps we could talk about how the celebration adapted for last year.
Well, unfortunately, about a week after the awards were announced, the English museums, who are our co-winners, had to close again. That was a real shame. So we were lucky that we were able to stay open, but we haven't been able to celebrate. You know, we just, because you can't have more than a couple of people in the same room together. It just hasn't been possible. We had, as Eilidh mentioned, you know, we had cards from all over and many people getting in touch to say congratulations, but we are overdue a party. And actually, we just heard from Art Fund last week, I think it was, Eilidh, they contacted us to say that the campaign to find the Museum of the Year 2021 is now in place, but we're still Museum of the Year for another few months. And when it comes to announcing this year's winner, they're going to invite all of of last year's winners along to the party as well. So it sounds like we are, COVID permitting, we are going to get a chance to party later this year and to meet the people from the museums, like the British Museum and the Tyner Gallery down in Eastbourne, who won along with us and who we went through this whole campaign with, but haven't yet had the chance to meet.
So I think there was one other thing that happened around the same time, and I don't know if these were planned, but a certain fairy tale came out with a certain narrator that certainly I was tagged in a few of the posts, and it also made my Twitter explode and had to be switched off over the weekend. Was the timing of the release of the Gairloch, which came out around about the same time as the announcement, was that planned? Was that part of it?
I'll let Eilidh take that one because she was manning the social media.
Yeah, because so much had to be online rather than in person. Each of the award-winning museums were kind of tasked with creating a sort of flagship bit of content that would then be used during that celebratory phase. A week, it felt like a year. In a week it was so busy, but it was just a week. And Karen, I think, had already been working with this lovely young chap, Abe, on beautiful drawings around the story of the Gairloch, and with the Art Fund's input, we're able to work this up into an animation and then find somebody to voice it, and that somebody ended up being Sam Heughan. And like, being a Museum of the Year tech, that gave us a huge huge audience. That video itself, I can't even remember what the figures are, but it was phenomenal. Now, if we'd had $1 for every American who got in touch to tell us how much they loved it, we could throw a really big party. But just to reach all, like audiences who probably, I don't know, who maybe wouldn't normally, maybe that's unfair of me, maybe wouldn't normally interact with a museum, even if it's a big award thing, it was phenomenal.
Absolutely, the reach I think you achieved through that was amazing, and a very global reach as well that perhaps wouldn't have happened at another time.
It's a nice story as well, how we got Sam Heughan. As Eilidh said, we were working with a media production company and a marketing company that the Art Fund was paying for this, and it made a huge difference. And they were really keen to get Sam Heughan, and they were pushing us to make that connection. And it was actually the daughter of the first curator of Gairloch Museum, the first professional curator, a man called Roy Wentworth, who was a Gaelic scholar as well, is well known for that. And his daughter, Jervil, she worked on Outlander. She looks after horses, I believe, on on the shoots, and so she knows Sam Heughan, and she was the one who made the connection for us.
Oh, that's wonderful! Such a circular story.
Yeah.
I will play everybody just very, very quickly the teaser trailer, and then invite you all to go and find it on YouTube to watch the full thing, because it is really wonderful. Thank you. And so there were some other events that happened, including an outdoor dig. Was that timed again to be the same, or was that something that you were able to just take advantage of?
Well, Art Fund were working with the BBC to run a week-long campaign promoting museums that would coincide with the announcement of the Museum of the Year. And so they were encouraging all museums to host a live event on the Thursday of that week under a hashtag. What was the hashtag, Eilidh?
Oh gosh.
Museums Matter or something like that. I've forgotten. Sorry.
There was a couple, because that was the day that it was party as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it happened to be Eilidh's birthday as well. So we had a birthday party for Eilidh at the archaeological dig. But I mean, it couldn't have gone better. We had perfect weather conditions. It was quite remarkable for this time of the year in October. And, you know, no mages, no rain, no wind. It was just perfect. And we got Tom Gardner along, who works for Historic Environment Scotland. He is an archaeologist, and he has local connections as well with Buchanan on the overside of Loch Gairloch. And he's just so enthusiastic about what he does, and he loves public engagement. And he was a real star of the screen, I think, for our first foray into live Facebook events, Eilidh.
Yeah, that was something else, actually, that whole spotlight did. I think between us in ordinary time, would we ever have thought about doing a Facebook Live? Maybe
outside?
not. Yeah, and outside. We weren't even sure if our phones would have a strong enough signal to make it practically work. But yeah, that kind of almost enthusiasm and I suppose a bit of confidence came from the big team in London who were going, yeah, go on, you can do it, it's dead easy, you know. So yeah.
Is it something you would do again? Did you enjoy doing it, Karen? You were front and center.
Yes, I think I did enjoy it. It was a bit nerve-wracking, but when you know you're live, and we had a massive audience for that as well, because the BBC were promoting it. So fortunately I performed quite well under pressure, and I suppose I did enjoy it, and you just had to go for it. And as I say, Tom was the real star. He was just amazing. He's so engaging. He's got great personality for this sort of thing, and he's a great archaeologist as well.
Yeah, the importance of getting someone that can really, I guess, tell those stories and engage people with the history and what was happening there, while also being good on camera, because it is a skill.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody can go and watch these films. They're still all on your Facebook channel, aren't they? So that they can.
Yes, and I think there's one on our YouTube channel as well. We did a summary of the 3-day dig of our findings. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that combined with a lot of the press. I haven't included a picture here, but you were on the One show as well, and on the news, and in a lot of the broadsheets and the papers. How do you sort of capitalise on that platform? And Eilidh, from your role as doing this marketing campaign that was a secret until just a week before, how do you look to sort of build on that and really help to embed it?
Yeah, well, you know, the biggest marketing budget in the world couldn't get us the exposure we had through gaining that award. It's just phenomenal. And there is a tail to that now. If we're contacting regional or national newspapers about, you know, maybe smaller events that they might not have been as interested in before. So there is a definite long-term effect from the connections and from the profile. And there is, I would say too, like with the audience, with visitors coming in, that they're, you know, a lot of them are saying, oh, we saw you on the One show. And whether that has been the sole factor in making them take their holiday in the Northwest Highlands or just part of it, but you know, it's great. So there's a marketing benefit for the museum, but also for the wider area, for Gairloch and the Northwest Highlands, I think.
So there's
Can I also just add that we did really well out of the press coverage, I think better than the other 4 winners, and because something about our story just grabbed the imagination, and we were pretty much top of every story. And you can see the headline there, that's page 3 of The Guardian, and it's all about Gairloch Museum. And I think just the idea of this museum in the Highlands, in this beautiful place run by volunteers and funded by volunteers, and it's in a nuclear bunker.
Yeah, and that whole massive community input, which is that, like they always say, what's the relevance to the man on the street? It's like the man on the street made this happen, but also maybe you can see from the image here as well, there's a real Cinderella rags to riches story. I mean, that just below the beautiful sharp lines of the new museum is what it looked like before this ugly duckling of what had been used as a roads depot for years and years, a real eyesore in the village, and became this beautiful, elegant swan.
Absolutely. I think it's always about story. And I think through last year, that's where museums have really succeeded engaging, whether it's their own personal story of their centre or the stories that they hold within them. So what do you think is next for Gairloch? How do you sort of build on this success? And with all that engagement you've been doing online as you open up and are hopefully more and more busy because more people are aware of you, and how do you keep engaging online and digitally and balance that with everyday work? That's quite a lot in that question, but maybe unpack it.
Well, we've been fortunate to get funding from the Art Fund and from Museums Galleries Scotland to employ a freelance events and outreach coordinator for the next year. And longer term, we hope to turn that into a post that, you know, that will be a not full-time, but a permanent post within the museum, because it's really a major part of our activity now, especially because we were closed for so long. So we've got lots going on, and we're extending it into different areas. We're also extending our audiences all the time. There's absolutely no way that we can now get all the people that are virtually coming to our events into our building. So we're now looking to find a way to move things to a blended delivery as well, so that we can have that combination of people who want to physically come to the event, but keep those virtual audiences as well, because you know, they really add something to the events, and because we're relatively inaccessible geographically, that's a great way that we can reach out to new audiences.
By connecting online, I think we do kind of cultivate a more informed visitor as well. They come here, they've learnt more about the history and the stories you're telling, and they have that kind of base knowledge when they come that they can then look to add on and engage. And the whole story of your museum and of that redevelopment, I think, is a special story to connect with people as well.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and there's that kind of sense of online community, particularly through the winter months, where, to be fair, going out even to a talk, if you could have gone out on a cold winter's night, is a bit of a thought. And to be in, if you like, in one another's sitting rooms, and those 5 or 10 minute chats we would have before the talk proper would start was a real way of keeping connected within the community. And it just so happened that some of that community was in America and in Australia now, so as well as Europe.
Do you have any final thoughts, Karen?
Just to, I mean, the whole experience has just been incredible for us, and the legacy of it is, I think, as well as the connections that we've made with new audiences, it's being mentioned in the same breath as museums like the Science Museum in London, you know, up there with these big players. We're on people's radars. Our profile is so high at the minute. And yeah, I just think the sky's the limit. We can't wait to get back to normal. It's been it's been a shame that we had to go through this in the COVID period, and that we couldn't involve the community and our sort of wider community of visitors more. However, I think it also offered us just so many opportunities that it's really hard to see past the positive, and the future is bright. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely note for us to finish on. I think that you've done a lot for raising awareness of the sector and the region as a whole, and to maybe challenge some misconceptions about what visiting heritage and museums up here is, and that they can stand shoulder and shoulder with the big guys across the country. Thank you very much. I would encourage everybody to go and visit you online. You have a great website and a great social media presence, and we look forward to watching your progress over the year ahead. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.